I started learning art 1 year ago, and I went from this to this without drawing every single day. I've always been really into anime art ever since I was a little kid. I liked Hayana Natsu's artworks, and then later on I got into webtoons and gacha games like Genshin Impact and Arknights, and I just really liked their illustrations. I wanted to make drawings like that. I also thought I was not talented enough up until I saw PewDiePie's video, and that made me realize that anyone can get good at art as long as they put in the work. And so that's basically how I started on my art journey. To give a brief overview of my art journey, I started February 23rd, 2024, and mostly I've been just practicing my fundamentals. From March to August, I wasn't at the point where I was taking art seriously yet, and I was just sketching on random pieces of paper and messing around with ibis paint. I did a little bit of draw box and gesture drawing, but I was still searching for that perfect video, and sometimes I would go weeks without drawing. But then in August, I decided that I wanted to take art more seriously, so I got myself a sketchbook. I got through more draw box. To be honest, I never got to the 250 box challenge. I just learned the basics of perspective and then taught myself how to draw the box. Then that led me to learn organic form and construction, and also a little bit of Loomis and figure drawing using basic geometric shapes. But most of the time I was just practicing faces by copying art that I liked, and that was a big mistake because I just got burnt out because I felt like I wasn't improving enough and I had to take a break. In late November, I made the switch to digital art once I got motivated to draw again, and basically I spent that period just getting used to Clip Studio Paint and trying to get the pen pressures to something I was comfortable with. And December was when I actually started doing studies. I got the Morpho book, I think it was the simplified forms, and I started copying from the book. December was just me trying to figure out how to do studies, and I also did a little bit more head drawing practice by trying to learn how to rotate Loomis from different perspectives. January, I started doing studies with the 3-month improvement method, and I think that improved my art a lot because I started referencing from pro artists, and that helped me animate heads look a lot better. February, I'm still learning anatomy, and I've done a lot more figure drawing and gestures, and I think I've improved a lot from last February to now. I took a lot of trial and error to get to this point, so I want to give some tips to anyone who might feel lost as to how they can improve quickly and effectively. But disclaimer, this is for the artist who's actually serious about improving and is willing to go through the struggle of learning art in order to improve as fast as possible. So what did I learn? Well, I think there are 3 keys to improving: consistency, intensity, and talent. So coming from someone who's been drawing for a year, I think talent comes in the form of observational ability. Observational ability is basically the ability for you to visually interpret things. If 2 people with no art experience tried to draw from reference, the person with the better observational ability would be able to more accurately draw the copy of the reference. But actually, this is more so a skill to be trained than talent, because it's largely dependent on your exposure to art and how critically you look at the world. And if you're lacking in observational ability, you can always try copying bark plates or just in general exposing yourself to more art. Okay, but Yes, it's true that observational ability will give you a head start, but in the end, effective practice is the most important thing. You need to be consistent enough, because more practice equates to more improvement. You have to realize that art is a process that can't be rushed when you're learning, but it is possible for you to do it within a shorter time frame by pouring in lots of hours each day to learn. However, you don't have to practice every day. For me personally, I spend 1 to 4 days a week and then 1 to 4 hours every drawing session with breaks, and I still was able to improve a lot, I would say. You might think from YouTube videos online that if you just practice every day, you'll automatically improve, but it's going to be really slow in comparison to someone who actually learns from their mistakes and is actively practicing to get better. And that's the intensity component. You have to draw with the intent of improving. You have to challenge yourself and get out of your comfort zone. For beginners, that means learning the fundamentals. And that was the mistake I made in my sketchbook phase. I was copying without understanding. You've probably heard of this advice before, and I did too at that time, but I still ended up falling into the trap of copying without understanding. So let me tell you how you can actually implement these 3 keys into your practices. So the best way is to follow the draw, reflect, and learn cycle. So a lot of other YouTube videos talk about this, but Naoki Saito's version of it, called the 3-month improvement method, really helped me understand how to do it and why it's important to practice in this way. And you can either check out his book, Fastest Way to Improve, or his channel to learn more about this method. But here's a quick summary. 1, you need to find a role model. That was another mistake I made during my sketchbook phase. I was referencing from too many artists, and I didn't realize that every single art style, they follow a different set of rules, and that can get really confusing for a beginner who doesn't have any knowledge of the rules. And that's why you need to find one master artist to reference from, and that master artist can be any artist whose art you really like, the one artist you probably wish you could draw like, and in the next stage, you're going to try using their style to make an original piece by putting in your best effort. You can reference 1 to 3 of their pieces, and by imitating their art in this way, it forces you to really understand what they're doing in their art so that you can apply it to your own piece. Obviously, as a beginner, you don't know how to draw a lot of things, so if you're lost, you can watch some specific tutorials or references on the topics, but just enough to get through the piece. Those are the things you're going to identify in the next step, which is reflecting. So that's where you compare with the master artist and take notes on your biggest weaknesses and what you need to work on. It might be discouraging to see how much you're lacking, but if you just trust the process and follow this method, you are going to experience massive improvement. As a side note, it also improves your observational skill because you're learning to be critical about other people's art. And finally, there's the learn step, which is to do focused studies on your number 1 biggest weakness that you found from the reflect step. So you may be wondering, what even is an art study? Well, let me explain. So you want to follow the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule, which is to learn 20% of the basics so you can apply 80% of it in your own art. Studies should consist of 3 components: learning, practice, and application. So for the learning portion, you just need to pick up an art book or watch YouTube videos for the basic knowledge, but ultimately you want to prioritize understanding. And And you can implement this into your practices by referencing from whatever resource in order to make your own drawing. You can do this by putting your own spin to the drawing and drawing the subject from a different angle. If you really need to, you can trace or copy the reference in order to analyze the drawing, but you want to make sure to keep it to the minimum because in the end, the most important thing is understanding. Then for the practice portion, you need to exercise that knowledge, and you can do that by using photo references or just other people's arts, depending on your needs. Finally, you need to apply that information to make sure you learn from the study. So this would be trying to draw from imagination. And this is basically the mini application, and step 2, the drawing stage, will be the big application. So how long should this stage take? Well, that depends on you. You have to practice it until you can say that you're familiar enough with the subject to see improvement in your next piece. But things to keep in mind is that don't get stuck in studies or else you'll never be able to get to drawing your own art. And as a general framework, you want to be able to make at least one finished piece a month. And the more finished pieces you make, the better, as long as you're properly following all the steps. After that, you basically just repeat steps 2 to 4, and if you do that, you'll see massive improvement. I started in January and I've only made one finished piece so far, but I've already seen a lot of improvement using this study method. The book says 3 months, but technically you can apply it to your whole art journey. You can just switch out the master artist every 3 months so you diversify your style, and you can make modifications to this study method as you see fit. Okay, moving on to some other miscellaneous tips. In the end, this process is going to be painful, you're going to struggle a lot, and for that, you're going to need strong motivation. You need to stay motivated enough to draw even when you don't feel like drawing. And for me, my motivation is to make good art. And I want to be able to get to that stage as fast as possible. And that's why I'm really passionate about art. I think about it 24 hours a day. And I find studies fun because even at the end of just one drawing session, I get really happy when I see that I improved. Also, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so finished pieces burn me out, so I'm not great at getting those done. I'm still trying to work on that. Other than that, if you need a general framework for the fundamentals you need to study and what resources you can use, you can check out Radio Runner's curriculum for the solo artist. I'm putting the link in the description. Also, socials can be a good motivating factor. You can find a good art community for feedback and getting inspiration. And I'll put some links in the description for some art communities that I personally think are really good. And starting a social media account can keep you accountable. That's why I started an Instagram account. But a word of warning, in the process, I started kind of getting obsessed with chasing clout because I wasn't getting the engagement I wanted. So maybe don't start an art account, I don't know. Pro artists might post their art progress, but I've always been curious about how they got here, so I'm documenting my journey and my insights while I try to speedrun pro level art. Subscribe for art improvement tips, or if you just want to join me on my art journey. And that's all for this video. Bye!